Hey, Bio Kids. Today we are starting our last sections of the body system. So we have 3 parts left: endocrine, nervous, and reproductive systems, and then we're done. So we'll take a test at the end of this, and then we will be done for the year. So that's great. So I posted the notes to print. So if you're printing them, you can feel free to print them if you're just following along. The PowerPoints are also up. Okay, so let's get started. I'm gonna try to do a system a day just so we can get through it faster. I think that'll be plenty of time. Okay, so we're starting with homeostasis. So what is homeostasis? It's the ability of an organism to maintain a stable internal environment even when the external environment changes. So it's like when our body is trying to maintain its temperature even when it's cold outside, something like that. Homeostasis is also called dynamic equilibrium because inside an organism, small changes are constantly being made to maintain a balanced internal environment. So why don't you push pause and see if you can remember the 8 life processes that are listed below, and then unpause it when you're done. Okay, so the first one is reproduction, which is the process by which organisms produce new organisms. It's not required for a single organism to do, but if you want the species to continue, some organisms need to reproduce. 2, regulation. The second R is regulation, the process of controlling all of the chemical reactions in the organisms. I guess with some blanks it might have been tricky, but I think you guys can do it. R, respiration, the process by which energy in the chemical bonds of glucose is released for use in the cells. E, excretion, is the removal of waste produced by organisms, like removing carbon dioxide. G, growth, is increasing the size or number in the cells in an organism. N, nutrition, is obtaining the materials and energy needed to live. T, transport, moving nutrients, waste, and messages around the organisms. S is synthesis, putting together simple substances to make more complex substances. And disease will result if there's a failure of homeostasis. So when one or more of these processes is disrupted, that's when your body may experience disease. Okay, so we're going to focus on regulation during the endocrine section. Regulation requires feedback mechanisms, and these are cycles in which the output or result of a sequence of events influences the first event in the cycle. So for example, when you increase your heart rate or respiration rate in response to exercising. Another one, guard cells on the plant leaf open or close for gas exchange and water in a plant. And then increased level of insulin in blood after a meal will allow for the uptake of glucose by body cells. You can have 2 types of feedback loops. You can have a negative and a positive. A negative feedback mechanism is one where the events in the cycle will act to decrease one of the first events. So for example, maintaining a normal body temperature. So the brain senses the temperature has dropped. The message is sent to muscles to begin shivering. Heat is generated as your body warms, as your muscles are moving more and your body warms. The brain senses a rise in body temperature and stops sending the message to shiver. So body temperature then again decreases, and then it's a cycle. A positive feedback mechanism is one in which the events in the cycle will act to increase one of the first events, like childbirth. So muscle contractions push the body's head against the base of the uterus, and then this arrow should be pointing the other direction. Muscles surrounding the uterus have even stronger contractions, and it continues until the baby is born. Okay, so we're going to talk about the nervous system first. Okay, so the function of the nervous system is to recognize and coordinate the body's response to changes in the internal or external environment. Basically regulation. So it consists of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The structures include the central nervous system, which are the brain and spinal cord. So I think I would write brain and spinal cord, and then peripheral nerves for peripheral nervous system. Okay, nerve cord is dependent on functioning of neurons. It involves the stimulus, which is the change in environment. It involves receptors, which detect the change, a response, which reacts to the change, and then effectors, which is the organ of response. Like it could be a muscle or a gland. So this is showing you that like the hot object is your stimulus. Receptors detect the stimulus, and then basically your hand responds. Okay, so you guys could do this on your own. I'm gonna skip ahead and keep going with the notes. These are interesting little videos on how your brain responds to pain and itching. Okay, nerve cells are neurons. The dendrite is what detects the stimulus. These little portions right here, if you guys can label that also. The cell body houses the nucleus, right here. There's the nucleus. The axon transmits impulses away from the cell body. And then at the end, the axon terminal is where you have nerve endings and where your neurotransmitters get released. Okay, so you can label that just like you saw right here. So the dendrites, the cell body, the axon, and the axon terminal. Okay, so neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that transmit a signal. They're released from axon terminals. So basically, when you are at the end of your axon, there's going to be a space called a synaptic cleft. And that's where the neurotransmitters have to go. They have to cross this synaptic cleft. It will bind to a receptor on a target. So it's showing you here. It's going to bind to receptors. And then the receptors are going to create a response. Okay, so the nerve impulse is transported down the axon away from the cell body. Some axons are wrapped in what's called a myelin sheath, this right here. And then the gaps are called nodes. So the impulse basically keeps jumping all the way down. So it jumps from node to node, which increases the speed of the impulse transmission. An action potential is when you have a change in electrical charge as the impulse moves down the axon. So sometimes you have unmyelinated neurons, and the question is why? And it could be because of a disorder, like multiple sclerosis. So these are disorders of the nervous system. You have meningitis, which is inflammation of the meninges, which are the membranes surrounding the brain and spinal cord. You could have a stroke, which is caused from a cerebral hemorrhage or a blood clot in the blood vessel to the brain. MS is an autoimmune disease resulting in loss of the myelin sheath surrounding the axon. And then this is about concussions, which are pretty interesting and relevant to you guys. Okay, so we're gonna stop there. I'm gonna post this video and the little attachments that are in the PowerPoints that you can watch if you'd like. All right, I will talk to you tomorrow.